We don't have Mr. D this week. Big D, Big Welsh D, can't make it this week, but he will be on the next episode. But we do have... All right, George, you don't even know about the war and the this and the that and that. And he started banging on about all this stuff that's happened.
Ryan, the main question is, why did the band split?
You said that so casually, a $3.6 billion project, right?
I'll be really honest, I think it looks shit.
I don't mind anyone making a mistake once, but if we make it again, then there's going to be a big problem.
Anybody listening that's struggling with the Welsh guys, like, God help you today.
It's like building a Disneyland.
Oh, for Doz. For Doz.
Oh, yeah, shit. For Doz. Mr. D.
Roundup sound. Ooh, yeah. Real estate deals. We lay them down. Let's get those deals. Deals making money, baby.
So welcome back. Episode 9 of the Ground Up podcast. And as mentioned, we don't have Big D today, but we do have Ronan. We're going to come to Ronan in 2 seconds. But for now, in this episode, we're going to be covering a lot of commercial property, thanks to Ronan being here. We'll be talking about developments at scale, thanks to Ronan being here. We're going to talk about billions of dollars worth of developments on huge infrastructure projects and resorts, thanks to Ronan being here. And we're going to talk about whiskey, thanks to Ronan being here. So there's going to be a lot coming out of this episode: property development, planning. I'm going to do some comparisons with Ireland and England as well for anyone that's not aware of the differences between the two countries when it comes down to planning and legalities and other bits and bobs. So should be an interesting deep dive for all of us, as well as anyone listening at home. But yeah, we're going to be talking about some big properties. So let's dive in. And Ronan, kick us away, mate. Give us a 101 on who you are and yeah,
It's
what
episode 9 already, hey?
I know, mate. Over 2 months.
Fair play. Well, Newquay Homes is my firm. I'm based about 20 minutes north, as mentioned, north of Dublin Airport. And I'm mostly doing residential construction, but I've gone into commercial in the last number of years. Commercial meaning large neighbourhood centres, supermarket-anchored neighbourhood centres, which seem to be working out well for me. I call them posh sheds. They're a little bit more complicated than that, but happy to run through it. But I've about 850 units in terms of residential units in the pipeline, and about 190,000 square feet of commercial sites. So in the middle of it at the moment and ramping up. It wasn't always like that, but we obviously built up from a couple of houses up to maybe delivering about 100 or so now, and obviously scaling that up to probably 250 next year. So with that, ramping up the team, and yeah, Ireland's going through a good patch at the moment. There's a huge amount of need for housing, and if we can get through some of this planning, which we'll speak about as well, I think there's going to be a good flow of that for the next couple of years.
Banging. And Ronan, can we ask about, before we dive into some of the projects that you're on now, and then we can, I know the guys want to go do some questions. Can we just talk about what you did before you set up on your own? You worked at Mace, right? So I'll just pull this up for you.
Yeah, I worked at Mace International, they're known at the time, or Mace Group is known now. Really got my education in that. I'd done a couple of degrees before that, but I went to Mace in about 2008. And this is a site in the Bahamas. You're looking at about 1,000 acres there, which used to be the middle of the town, but the developer, it was an Ismailian family, they went in and bought 1,000 acres there. They actually made a lot of their money or wealth from peanuts. They owned a third of the world's peanut trades of all things. But this was one job. It was 3.6 billion. But before that, I was in Dubai in the Middle East. And in the Middle East,
wait, Ronan. Ronan,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt that, but just for anyone listening at home and just for me listening as well, you said that so casually, a $3.6 billion project, right? I mean, how rare is that for someone to be able to work on a project like that?
Yeah, it's pretty rare. In the Middle East, you get a lot of them because in the Middle East, you build a lot of like cities from scratch and stuff. I was involved originally with Moudon out in the Middle East with Dubai Properties, as well as a couple of other ones. But yeah, they're big. But I suppose the luxury of being with a massive international construction / project management consultancy firm like Mace is, this one here, there's a couple of us headhunted from around the world to jump onto this job. and it was a great ticket to go into. For me, I was in Dubai. I wasn't paying any tax. I asked where was this job on. It was in Nassau in the Bahamas, and no, obviously there's no tax in it as well. Plus, obviously the exposure to this size of job. So, as you can imagine, it was quite stressful. It was a very intense job. We spent about 45 million a month. So every morning by 10:30 or so, you've committed $1.5 million. So
Jesus.
there's a lot to learn off that. If it went wrong, it could go wrong very quick at large sums. So it's something that Mace honed in on me, was just procedures and standards and driving quality, and then obviously keeping customers or bringing in new customers. So they were excellent at that, and really my full education was with Mace and with the people around Mace. I had a couple of great mentors. I was luckily enough to be just very lucky to be on some great teams, great leaders around. So it was great, and you throw yourself at it for a few years. I think I was with them for about 6 or 7 years, something like that. But great education, loved it.
Ronan,
But yeah.
Ronan, just to ask a couple of questions. So you said you were headhunting to go to this site. What was you doing previously, and what was like the key responsibilities of this site? What was your
Yeah,
biggest challenges as well?
I was project managing a site, I think, called the Villa Project, or no, there was one for a large oil company who were working in Iraq and flying in and out to the head office just off Sheikh Zayed Road. I done a fit out for that for 3 floors with a team in Mace, and then that one, when the fit out was coming to an end, and I was like, "Where's the next big project?" And I kind of wanted to get out in the Middle East, so they were looking for this site. I was asked, I think Mike Barford was one of my mentors, and he ended up getting onto this job, albeit after I got there. But I was asked would I go over and do this job. My role was to be a PM, a project manager on it for the core works. So due to the size of the project, it was broken into massive packages. The core works being essentially the superstructure, so the whole frame of the building, including the hotels, the whole podium, the casino, but the structural frame. So it was a massive building. But it consists of, here you can just about see it in the outlay. There's about 5 hotels, 2,500 bedrooms, Jack Nicklaus golf course. The detail in it was intense. We built a new beach. As you can imagine, it's a resort, so it's huge. I think the casino is just over 100,000 square feet, and we had a Chinese contractor on it, CSE. They have about 160,000 employees. But all of the guys on site were Chinese, so we had translators and stuff like that. And because it's the other thing as well, lads, it's an island, so everything they're coming on, whether it be a cement mixer, everything, we built 3 ports just to bring the material onto site, and then we used to hand it over to the army every night because the value of the material. Imagine the value of the copper cable and stuff like that. It was just massive. And we built that new access road as well from the airport. All that infrastructure you can see is all built as part of the project.
So did you say it was 3.7 billion?
3.6, yeah.
Was that just purely the build costs?
Yes, I think so. It was the largest privately funded resort project on the planet at the time. It was originally, I believe, supposed to be funded by Caesars in Vegas, but then the crash, I think, hit it, and the guys that were willing to put in the money, I think in 08, 09, was China Import-Export Bank of China, and it turned out to be a bit of a headache, to say the least, for the developer. The Chinese essentially took it off him, and it's in the Supreme Courts in the US since. The resort's open. I've been to it since it launched. But yeah, a vast project, exceptionally complicated, and then it got very, very contractual, which is a whole other podcast in itself. But I had great learnings from the site, and I've adopted a lot of my time with Mace into what I do now at home. And I went from that project, which was one of the largest private ones in the world, to 2 houses. So when I moved home, the scale, it dropped off significantly. But you have to start from somewhere, and that's what I done. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, just for anyone listening at home, for your benefit, a minute ago we just played some of the video footage from this site. If you want better context, and it's casinos, hotels, pools, water parks, golf courses, brand new beaches, just anything. Matt, it's like building a Disneyland.
Yeah, you can
I think
you can check it out on YouTube. There's plenty of videos. It's a huge resort, and loads of special features, loads of stuff going on. So yeah, it's
Crazy.
it's enormous. Yeah.
I think the big thing, because now what we'll do is we'll go into some of the projects that you've gone on to, and I think for anyone listening at home, the reason we're banging on about this mega project is because it gave Ronan obviously a very interesting perspective before stepping out on your own, right? So what were like the main takeaways, and how did you then go? Do you know what I want to do stuff on my own?
Yeah, I suppose I was always wanted to do stuff on my own, and I know yourselves from another group, and we're all very, very driven, and we want to do well for ourselves. But my idea of going to the Middle East, the only reason I went there was at the time was is the most amount of cranes in the world was concentrated in Dubai. So it's like we're best to get an education than going there. Um, but in doing that, I got lucky, or you make your own luck. I want to join mates if I didn't fly over there with no job. I joined Mace, and they were fantastic. The biggest takeaway from Mace is obviously put a strong team around you. But like it's so simple, the procedures, standards, and driving quality. If you don't have procedures in place, you're not going to get a standard, and if you don't have the standard, you're not going to deliver quality. So, um, as small as an operation I went and established, it's such a part of it. So that really has been something I've kept with me. Um, if something goes wrong, you need to be able to trace it and see what happened. Where did we get approval for certain things, or why didn't we do it? A design issue, or have a look at something in a different way. So they were all extremely important. I've adopted them to my own business, but I always wanted to go back and develop myself. My father's background was in property development, so he was doing his thing. I kind of didn't want to get morphed into that because I wouldn't get a real raw education of it. So I just flew out straight away to get a great education. And then came back and just had a go. I think I was 27, 26 when I flew back, 27 when I started the site in Drogheda, and give it a go. I was young enough, probably naive, not naive. I was always going to do it, but you know yourself, guys. I think you're all the same. Give it a go now, because when you're 40 or plus and you have a mortgage and kids, that risk is maybe it mightn't be as easy to take. So I was always going to throw myself at it and hopefully get through it. And I think we can touch on it on a couple of these. And I'm not sure about the rest of the guys, but the sites I learned the most are the most challenging ones. The ones that go straight through and you make money, they're great, but they don't educate you. They don't really
They don't push you. They
they
don't make
don't
you
push
grow, do they?
they
Yeah.
don't push you, but like you can't bring much knowledge to the next site because you haven't gone through many challenges of it. Where I had a couple of nice ones to start, and then I had one excruciating one, which if I got through it, I was going to say I'm nearly going to look at a different job or different project. And that really was an education. And as we always say when we're discussing this amongst ourselves, if you can get out not losing money or making a little bit of money, then it's a very valuable lesson. And luckily, I've been there, went through that, and come out the far side. So they were invaluable experience as well on my own back, because you guys, as a developer, it can be a lonely place. So it's good to have these chats, figure things out together. More brains is better than one, and I just find it excellent with you guys doing this as part of the podcast to just share and educate along those grounds.
Yeah, banger, mate. Thank you. Appreciate it. I mean, Ronan, just to give a bit more context for anyone listening, could you give us a quick age age when you joined Mace, left Mace, set up on your own, and then how long it's taken you from there to now?
Yeah, I went out to Dubai when I was 21.
Oh,
I just
mad. Really young.
jumped on a flight in January back in whenever it was, 08 or so, and just needed to get out and find a place. Obviously a big move at that age, maybe, but I'd done it, and it was great. It turned out well. And then was with Mace. I came back. I was 27 when I started in Newquay, and I'm 38 now. So I'm about 10 years building. COVID in the middle of that. COVID, we didn't build anything for about a year and a half. Spent a bit of time down in Marbella. Went down for 2 weeks with my wife and spent 6 months there. So it was a bit
Nice.
different, but that was great crack.
Nice.
But yeah, that's the bullet time frames. I was straight out of college young. I think I'd finished my degree around 19 and a half, 20 years old, and done about 6 months travel, and then just went at it from there.
Amazing, mate. All right, well let's get on to where you are now then, sir. So have I just fucked that up? No. Yeah, there we go. So
I think we've all, you guys, where have you all started from? More or less the same, right? I started with 2 projects or 2 houses.
Yeah. Literally, HMO, Guildford, COVID time, 80 odd contractors sort of work asking what we're going to do because they weren't in the furlough scheme. There were sort of little businesses that are built their businesses around Skyloft. So we had no decision but to buy something just to get them on that didn't involve a customer. And it started from 1 to 4 in a year. And the rest is history, really. Now we're just doing bigger stuff. And like you said about the educational piece, I mean, you've got to value the development journey with learning the educational piece because it's almost as important as the profit because you need to keep growing and putting yourself in slightly higher risk environments that you're going to learn this stuff. Otherwise, you'll just do the same thing again and again and again. It could get quite boring quite quickly. You need to push yourself.
I put down lessons learned at the end of every project, like through each from the ground up. From starting at the civils package the whole way through, I always do a lessons learned and try and adopt that and share that with our team.
Yeah, we do that.
Just to try and close the triangle. You're never going to capture it all, but you just don't want to make the same mistakes again. So,
Yeah, so I started out doing one house at a time, but I was building ground up on the tools, so I could only really do one at a time. Just did house after house after house, and I was like, I like the money, but I don't like being on the scaffolding in the winter. Let's do a few more. So then we set up XP. But no, it's refreshing, Ronan. I think what you mentioned there, if you can do a deal that doesn't lose you money and you gain experience is super key. I accepted an offer back end of last week, just of a flip that we did, and I'm not really going to make a lot off it. And it's just one of those ones, you've got to get it done, get it finished. Yeah, you might have had a difficult project or a difficult time in the market, but they happen, and it's all about finishing it off, learning from it, and moving on.
Yeah.
Just on the lessons learned, guys, quickly, just on the lessons learned. So with our operation, our construction business, every 3 months we do a non-conformance. So we go out for lunch. There's no blame. We just sit down with the problems we've learned that quarter and we look at new systems, new processes, things to add to our pre-start construction forms, what we need to take photos of, just to constantly keep learning. Because if you don't do that, you just will make the same mistake again and again and again. And that is a problem. That's a big problem when you're losing cash. I don't mind anyone making a mistake once, but if we make it again, then there's going to be a big problem because that gives the team freedom to use their initiative and to grow and to trial things. But if you're making the same mistake 2-3 times, then we're going to have a big problem. So
that's great. I might adopt that myself.
Yeah, you see, you do a proper sit-down lunch with the team, and literally go, look, guys, cards on the table. Who's fucked up? What's fucked up? Blah, blah.
Every 3 months we'll go for lunch. So it'll just be down the village, one of the local pubs where, it's of an afternoon. And then every 6 months we try and go out with the fitters to make it more of a fun, whether it's the races, go-kart and whatever. And we'll sort of adapt new processes in a fun environment because no one really wants to come to meetings, but if you can tie it around something that's, something around Christmas, something around the summer is what we try and do. And we just take all our new lessons learned that we've adopted and put into the system and then try and present them to everyone and say, look, we're now going to start doing things this way because, and explain the whole reason why. And, out of that 10-15% will stick and go long-term. And then things that don't stick, we'll then try and cover in the next meeting and just make little changes all the time, but constantly adapting the process to make sure that we're going in the same direction. Because when you've got a big team as well, it's very difficult to bring everyone on board, and you can't have I don't find AMG big meetings and stuff that powerful. I think having small, close-knit teams in groups where you can spend the time, because it's about quality time to build a culture. It's not about, dictatorship, throwing out a load of processes and going, that's what we're now doing, because it won't stick. You need to just explain all the reasons why we're trying to change this stuff to make it better.
Yeah. No, nice, mate. I'm not gonna. I mean, to be fair, we constantly are talking and chatting, and everyone's around mine most nights, and then we're in the office. So I suppose we're constantly talking about it, but making a formal way of doing it is definitely it's an interesting.
Do you have any issues where you just don't want to talk about it? Where there's a time where you just need to chill out and turn the brain off?
Over time, you can talk about anything, but in the moment, you just, and that we said that on another podcast, is I used to get quite emotional when there's a fucking problem. We just need to deal with it straight away. And it was the wrong time to reply to that email, make the phone call. You just need to sleep on it. If you don't, you'll make bad decisions in the moment. I think that's that's one of the hardest things I've had to try and overcome.
You learn as you go.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of say that. I think one of the sort of true feats of finding a good business partner that I have with Ben is we don't agree on everything. There are times where he wants to do A and I want to do B. And at the end of the day, someone's just got to put their neck out and take the decision. And it's kind of like, it's never told you so or told you I was right. Just crack on. It's either right or wrong or indifferent. But one thing that's really, really clear is there's no emotion in business. It's you sometimes at a crossroads. Sometimes the team is sided, whether it's one person or a group. And you've got to pick one, because I'd rather go down one route, make a mistake and make amends quicker than hesitating and being sat there and not learning or not moving forwards. So Ben and I actually, this is, I don't know if any of you guys do this, but we actually make the decision fun and we put a wager on it. So I'll go, I completely disagree with you, but you crack on and we'll have a tenner on it. And it just sort of makes life fun that when the result does come in, someone's a winner, someone's a loser, but you move on, you pick yourself up and you go again. And it always happens. Like Ben and I have probably got about a dozen outstanding tenner bets. And it's not because, it's just a bit of fun. We've gone with his decision. And then you back that decision. And then if it's against what I think the other party in the business has got to back that and, root for that, the best result is they're right and, the business benefits. So I think taking the emotion out of it and sometimes having a little bit of a wager sort of loosens a difficult decision like that.
Jack, I'm even more of a disaster because in my operational business there is no decision maker apart from me, and I'm gun ho, man. If we think of an idea, bang, let's go that way. And I've actually learned to slow that down a bit, and I've actually brought my key management team in now, so all the heads of departments, they make the decision ultimately as well. So I'm going to try and spread the risk, and you need them fully on board as well. So I'll run probably 3, 4, 5 decisions a month past them. And 1 or 2 of those decisions, we'll know where we're going, but it's ultimately how we're going to get there. And I think those decisions, whether we take this site on or whether we change our process, which is quite a big change, I will run past the office and we'll just literally go through all the pros and cons of that. And then ultimately it will stick or it won't. And that's how we try and deal with it. Because, being on your own is even more of a disaster because you've got no one to bet on yourself. Bet on yourself to make the wrong call.
Well, I suppose for the listeners out there and even for you, Stu, I run businesses with Ben, and then there's businesses that I run outside of Ben, and Ben runs without me. All the time he'll call me and go, mate, I just need your opinion on something. It's got nothing to do with XP surveys and this, that and the other.
Yeah.
He's like, I actually hit a conundrum in Aura. I just want your opinion. And then I'll go, I think your view's right. Give him my view. And then he goes on. So it's just about being open to making that phone call. Because I know that if any of you three gave me a call and said, I'm at a crossroads, am I making the wrong decision? You'd get an honest perspective. And, you can then still go with your decision. So
almost
just
like
reach out to anyone.
That's actually really underrated how valuable it is to know and trust people that when you go and ask them for something, they're not going to give you feedback that's complimentary or kind of fart asses around what you really need to hear. Go, here's what you need to hear, mate. Sorry that you're hearing it that way, but that's the best way I can help you. And that there's just not many people that can build relationships like that.
So there's an office next door to me, which is actually a commercial agency. There's a couple of lads set up on their own, only been going a few years, and they're both from an employment professional background. One's a chartered surveyor, and the other's an ex-estate agent. And they've set up their commercial arm, and they're doing a great job. And we do quite a lot of work with them. And then they've set up their resi arm. And I went in the other day, and he was like, "Oh, we got our branding and logo done for our resi arm," and showed me it. And I was like, "Really sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I fucking hate it. I absolutely hate branding." And he was so taken back that I was so blunt about something that he had, created and probably manifested for a little while and a few years. And I was like, I'm being really honest. I think it looks shit. I think it looks completely budget. It doesn't complement your other branding. It looks like you've got someone from the Philippines to do it and paid him a $5. I was like, I think this doesn't represent you as well as a business as it could do. I was complimenting his business, but the branding wasn't there. And I think just
that answer than just a
completely,
okay,
but
it's nice.
Absolutely.
But I think he had probably had 10 people go, "Oh, that looks amazing."
It's lovely. It's
But
lovely.
they're not
Well
actually
done.
thinking about being a consumer and looking at the board outside a house and visualizing it. And I think that's what's great. I love about you guys is because we will call each other out if we think something's, if we think something's a bit hazy or not sure or whatever it may be. And that's kind of what you need.
You definitely will, Jack. I can't imagine anyone else who would say it more blunt than you, mate. You won't ever hold back. But just on your point, I mean, trying to build a bit of a non-exec board around you, whether it's friends, family, other people who have done it, and you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So, I mean, this is obviously part of the podcast, and part of the people I try and surround myself now is people who are going to elevate you and make you think outside the box. Because if you're just doing it the same way, you will become stale, and everyone else will overtake you.
So important. I think even like we meet once a month amongst other guys, and I think that could be so valuable. You go away with a few nuggets that just um you adopt into your own business, or maybe you change in your own business because you've heard from guys who've teased it out or they've experienced it on their projects, and it's vitally important.
Just your mindset, Ronan. I mean, being around you, I've changed my whole business model based on 2 or 3 light-hearted conversations over a coffee and a bit of cake, and that's
Yeah,
sort of what
yeah,
you need to be around. You need to go, that's a
exactly.
fucking great idea. And just that little
Yeah,
tweak, little touch of the dial, and
yeah.
you're on a different trajectory altogether.
And for
So
people
yeah,
listening, like these things are these big projects. They're good and whatever else, but for me, it just doesn't intimidate me now. The size of them once it's in resi, or stuff I know. But for anyone listening, like 2 projects is all you need to start on, or sorry, 2 houses or 3 houses. If you get up to 10 or 15 houses, the rest is all cash flow. So like once you've completed something of 8 or 10 houses, I really think it's then just managing cash flow beyond that. Obviously, going into a bank, etc, you need to have something behind you. You need to be able to show that you've done these things. But really, beyond that, there's no difference in doing 100 houses as it is doing 15, which I think any listener should be able to pull from that and just try and get on the ladder, get a first couple of them started.
just before we move on that, what would be your key takeaways then? Because everyone knows that in development, cash flow is the biggest problem of them all. So
Mm.
what would be your key 1 or 2 little pointers there of how to manage that cash flow and those sort of size of projects?
It depends. Like in terms of like mine now would be like obviously you're going to get a QS in on the larger jobs. You're going to price. I'm going to know myself what it's going to be. I know my cost per square foot, etc. So like obviously the simple things you just keep adding to, you keep bringing in. You're going to have contingency in it. You want to keep an eye on any changes or any variations, obviously. So we've systems for adopting variations, or even if it's a design change, even if the architect thinks, this would look better. Okay, it'd look better, but it's going to cost me 60 grand more per X amount of units. So um on a if someone's just starting off on a small scale, bring in some help. Like there's QSs out there. There's possibly a guy you can go for coffee with and say, just look over these numbers. But from a cash flow point of view, really hone in on your packages. Depending on your skill set, are you going to bring in a main contractor? I kind of call it. I do it ground up, but I'm like white collar management of it. I bring in subbies everywhere. So JJ, would you add anything more to that on the cash flow?
I mean, yeah. I mean, to manage cash flow and key learnings, what we have really just started, is just throwing a lot of our value and attention and money and time at just building out the cash flow. It may sound ridiculous, but the more accurate it can be, the more you can sense a problem later down the line and make that tweak and change. So our business's cash flow is 3 years ahead, and each project is run till end with variations in the contingency. So for us, a project cash flow is actually probably less relevant. It's when you've got 8 projects and they all hit a cash flow problem in the same month is when you get a problem. So it's intertwining the web. So we just didn't cut any corners, and we invested in a really comprehensive, I suppose, bank of spreadsheets that all feed into each other. Then we've now invested in a very comprehensive bookkeeper that keeps them up to date weekly. Well, it's kind of daily, really, because she's working on them through to every day. And that's the main thing. I mean, obvious things such as be very conservative on your build costs. Make sure you've got contingencies in there just for cost, but not also time. Because what you've got to remember is everything on a spreadsheet will always move right, which is delays. It will never come forward. So make sure you contingency those times and then contingency them again. And yeah, as Ronan said, if you've then got the right team around you, that spreadsheet's going to be as accurate as it can be with a contingency in place.
I think one other
In
thing I'd add is just taking emotion out of it. Like sometimes you're trying to get your first or second project, and you just want to get it. And I think you
Mm.
need to stand back a little bit and take the emotion side of it out and make sure the numbers
yeah,
have enough comfort in them. One thing JJ spoke to me about, I think as part of your your due diligence is, your variable. So if it's 10% up, if construction cost is up, or if sales prices are down, I've since adopted that to our profile. So when we're doing an investment models, it has to be still making money within those parameters. So try and take the emotion out of it and leave a little bit of fat. So if something does go wrong, which it will, and you won't know what it is, but if it does, you have some way of tackling it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
we've
good.
spoke about the cash flow paradox. It is, and it is a fucking paradox when you're in property development, and anyone listening as well, starting property development or in property development, just anticipate cash flow issues. And one of the solutions that we've spoken about a few times, which all three of us have, Dorian has in other ways, but not necessarily to complement his business. And Ronan, it'd be interesting for you to answer this, but we all have these trading vehicles. Obviously, Stuart has Sky Lofts. Jack has XP surveys and a number of other things. I have the construction, the lettings, the sourcing, and a number of other things that tie in, and they give us cash flow outside of our developments because they are different businesses. That you have each development is its own business, right? Is how I like to explain it to people. Is it's got its own business case and business merits. It's like an investment business, but it also has operational procedures. It has cash flow constraints, it has overheads, it has a profit and loss. In some sense, it has profit and loss, but it also has a definitive end date. So there's like an exit to that business, quite a quick exit. So they're ephemeral businesses, but they should be treated like a business, but they are different to then running a servicing business. And that development business, if you like, that's just isolated to each project, can have cash flow issues. And if they're collateralized in any way, which we got ourselves tied into during the pandemic when we needed to raise cash and draw it out from equity elsewhere, you can get into a black hole like that, like super, super quick. Whereas if you have these guys over here that are completely isolated from your developments and they're just cash flowing nicely, and you can bump up the sales and be more aggressive if you need to produce more cash flow, and they can just come in and feed in deficits if you have any, because developments go wrong, right? You almost have to anticipate that,
Yeah.
1 in 3, 1 in 5 will just go wrong. So what do you do to get out of it? Some people raise debt, some people have cash. And I think just having cash is the better of two evils, right? That you just fork off profits from elsewhere to cover downsides, or to keep a project moving forwards, or the bank closes on you and you need to cash flow the contractors or something. Do you have any 2 cents on complementary cash flow with your development businesses?
Yeah, I think, and we'll probably all be guilty of it. Every time we've cash, we end up finding something to do with it. Oh, there's a project here, I know, a bit stretched, but let's maybe take that on. I think you have to be so disciplined to keep not just, obviously your fund. You need a fund, you need a rainy day fund as well as a contingency fund. But no, it's a very valid point on having a secondary business, or maybe maybe a main business, and then coming in. If some people might have a carpentry business or a plumbing business and are starting out in development, I didn't, and it was a big constraint from two occasions or two issues. One, cash flow. When things stopped, it stopped, like COVID. And two, for building a team. Like now I've runway, but until last year I hadn't run enough runway. So if I was all my cash is in on certain deals, and it slows down for COVID or whatever, or that deal is now coming to a completion, which is great, or project's coming to a completion, it takes about minimum probably 6 months to get a deal over the line. So if you didn't have the next site starting, your team that you've built up now, in my case, you had to let them go because you couldn't just keep paying their wages. So if I had an ancillary business that was cash flowing it, you could take it slightly different. Now, thankfully, I've built up a quite considerable commercial business. I've a few investors with me, but we've about 100,000 square feet at the end of this year that we'll own and fully leased. So there's good rent coming in off that. But yeah, like I think it's great. Stu, you at Skylofts. But as we said about cash flow, if you have 100 grand after a couple of projects, or a couple of 100 grand, Dorian was here. You're always generally looking at another deal with that money, even before it comes in. When you're expecting to make gross amount of money on the end of a project, for 6 months prior to that finishing, you're going out hunting, looking for the next deal, because it takes that long. Where now I have about 3 or 4 years of runway ahead of me in terms of delivery of a project in front of me. So that's very important, but it's difficult to do that at the start unless you have a secondary business or a main business.
Well, that's actually one of
Yeah,
the Dorian. Sorry, Jack. I just remember Dorian said recently, and I think it was in the podcast, where he met with, I'm not going to say names, but he met with a guy, very wealthy guy, and he consulted the guy on cash flow and said, I've got these cash flow issues. What's the best way to solve them? Do I need to raise more money? Do I need to do this, do that? And the guy just said, look, mate, you need a bigger pipeline. That's how you solve it. Because if you've got the pipeline, you've got continuity of works, and so long as you have them funded, then you can build out that core part of the business. particularly for Dorian's kind of business, and now for your kind of business, Ronan, where I'm guessing you're going to start to build that operational team to deliver these projects sequentially. So you're moving them from this project to that one, to that one, to that one, to that one. And that's the game, isn't it? When you're starting out in developments, how do you get to that point? And there's this sort of like shit valley in between where you got to try and get through. And I think that's where Jack always mentions critical mass, isn't it? Where you need to get to that part where once you're over the other side, your overheads are now actually making you profit rather than being something that you need to fork out for yourself or need to accept no profit on your first few deals because you've got to forward fund those overheads. And it's always a trap, isn't it?
Yeah, I think just sort of taking a step back and contexting your cash flow problem is really important. We're talking about two different cash flow issues here. We're talking about business cash flow and we're talking about personal expenditure cash flow. So obviously when you set up a business and you've got a trading entity like Stuart might have Skylofts and it pays for his lifestyle, he can then go set up a development company which is self-sufficient, asset building, legacy company, and keeps growing. But one thing that Ryan just said there, which is really important, is when Ben and I were running our development company, we were actually quite a profitable, high cash flow business when it was just two of us. Then when you go to the next stage where you go from like a 10 mil turnover to like a 30, 50 mil turnover business, you need a team. And that team around you comes at a cost. And that cost is running whether the project's finished or incomplete over the sort of 1, 2, 3 year process. So you could sort of reinvest all the capital to get to a size that suits that team so that you're then making a cash flow again. And then there's the next step where you take your business from 50 to 200, maybe even greater, or even bring construction in-house. And then you've got a new problem of cash flow. But so taking a step back and analyzing about the reinvestment, because there was a period where, you know, Ben and I had all of the businesses we were running. So there's 6 businesses in the group, and we're like, why are we always cash strapped? You know, are we running around like headless chickens and overdoing what we're doing? And then when you actually looked at every business was growing 100% year on year for the first 5 years, you should expect that as a result. So growth is something that's often neglected. So the reason that I bring that in is because if I met a early 20-year-olds running a couple of businesses and he was having cash flow problems, that doesn't mean there's profit problems. So I always look at businesses in 3 metrics. So you've got cash flow, profit, and risk. And it's all about you have high risk, low risk businesses. Normally, higher risk businesses produce higher profits. But in every business, you've got to have cash flow to get to the profits. Businesses don't fail off profit. Very few businesses fail off profit. Businesses fail because they haven't got the cash flow to get to the profit, or they haven't got the risk profile to de-risk to get to the profit. So the way that we see it is cash flow and risk is 2 stepping stones that you have to cross to get to the profit at the end. If you don't manage all 3 of those metrics, then you're doing something wrong. Little secret for anyone: if profit isn't there, you're going to have cash flow and risk problems regardless, and it's pointless taking that journey forward. So yeah, break the business down in terms of size, mass, group, what it looks like at the end, and then look at those 3 important things to make sure that you can sort of facilitate getting to the profit at the end.
Jack, just to touch on your 2 things there, I commend anyone who's trying to scale a business, because when you scale a business and put those different tiers of management in, it's a fucking pain in the ass, because you've got really good technicians. You have to either put people above or below them. You have to raise people up to become managers, which may not be their major skill set, or you bring managers in who will potentially destroy the culture you've been building. So by trying that, I commend anyone who wants to run a large business and cash flow, or anyone who wants to run a development company who hasn't got a cash flowing business on the side. Fair play, because you're going to have to make very little mistakes and you're going to have to grow a lot slower, I would say. I think the beautiful thing about having a sideline trading business is that it will plug gaps. And if we made a 20 grand or a 30 grand problem, that is only a 2, 3, 4 month problem that we can cash flow ourselves out of. So yeah, fair play to anyone who wants to scale or run a development company on its own.
Just the last point on that. Sorry, Ryan.
Go on.
Go on ahead. I just going to say, like, people might be saying, like, how could the cash flow get so tight so quick? Like, look at the people you're employing and the wages. Like, you're not paying people, you know, your minimum wage. Your guys are charging from 6, not your QSs, your project managers. You have maybe 60, 100 grand, 140 grand. You know, so you add 3 or 4 or 5 of those guys together, like your run rate per month gets high. I'd say Jack's business is probably 300,000-400,000. I'm north of that as well. Like, all of a sudden, the figures are high. So can move very, very quick. So that's where it really gets tight.
I mean, that's
Yep.
exactly why we started to scale our business, because we did an end of terrace development, made 50 grand out of it, and realized that that's basically 6 weeks of our burn rate. What's the point? So you have to understand that sort of scale and growth. And one thing I wanted to touch on that Ryan brought up, which I think that gets neglected a lot in our industry, and when, if you probably tracked back all of our clocks 5 years in the development space, we'd have been a bit wet behind the ears to this, is if you're running, Ryan mentioned, if you're running a project, if you see a project and you like the look of it and you want to move into development, and let's say it's £1 million gross development value, which for us guys is, for any development, you'll do well to do anything smaller than that if it's multiple units. Now, what you have to think is you're technically running £1 million turnover business overnight. You set up a limited company, you acquire that, and you're basically buying a large business. That's large by any account. And you've got to have everything in place. And you've got to think about the sales, the marketing, operations, finance, and the team, which is often neglected. People go, well, I'll just get a QS and a PM and tackle the planning and then build it out. It's simple, but you don't think about all of the ailments that would come with a business. So it's what we did is we got excited. Ben and I were from a construction or professional background, so we were confident in the construction, but we didn't think about all those elements. And then when we started bringing the second scheme in, we started thinking more about the core business, what that looks like, who the team is, what they cost, like Ronan said, and then facilitating a business plan. So the project is just a project; it's not actually the business itself, and that's also super key. But yeah, super relative, because Ronan's obviously not afraid of scale, but that comes with, I say the phrase all the time. Businesses are more likely to fail from indigestion than starvation, and it's managing that process.
Yeah. Well, let's get we'll now go on to Ronan's projects. So we'll start to have a look at stuff. Just before though, just for something you mentioned, Stu, and I don't know if anyone here has any conviction in their assumptions, but I know a lot of guys who start developments sometimes do start with a lot of money. They've gotten a big payout from a high-paying job, or they exited a company, sold Jack knows somebody sold a clothing company. There's people can end up having 5, 10, 20, 50 mil sat in the bank, and then they might start a development business. And that happens a lot. And all of our investors start like that, but they're obviously coming to us to be the development service, but they are kind of developers themselves. So most of the time you do have developers starting because they've ran into a large sum of cash. And that's
maybe they were selling peanuts beforehand.
A lot of fucking
Well, you
peanuts, and they built a casino.
You see the guy for Phones for You. Like, he's turned into one of the major developers in London now.
Is he?
There was a program built about him. Trying to think of the story.
Yeah, and I think that chap that has a Netflix special on the London real estate guy.
Yeah,
he's selling one of his homes for 250 million or 300 million, whatever the price is at the moment. But yeah, he sort of started out selling phones. Obviously, he's a billionaire from it, but they all seem to get their hand into property development at some stage too.
I think it makes sense, because the point being, sorry, just because development is capital intensive, isn't it? So you need a lot of cash. So it makes sense that people exit a company, run into a lot of cash, want to change a lifestyle, think it's sexy to become a developer, or just know that there is a good investment case there. Then they become this developer. Some of them then go bust, or some of them get burnt and then sort of go back into their field. And some of them do really well out of it. But not all developers bootstrap the way I think all of us guys have, where you start from nothing and you have to build your own war chest or a complementary service or vehicle to navigate through the early stages. But there are equally a lot of developers who start with a lot of money.
You still got to ask the right questions, though. It doesn't matter how much money you've got. If you're making ultimately, the buck stops with you. So you can have all the money to bring the right people in, but you need to know what people you need to make the whole piece of the puzzle work. So I can imagine a lot of people with a lot of money will lose a lot of money, and almost like it's like grassroots, small beginnings, and you have to make these little decisions on the way. If someone gave me £1 billion today and went, right, go and build Barbados, go and build bloody Ronan, you'd lose it all, because you just wouldn't have all the skills and all the things you need to make it happen. So it's not all about the money.
To put it into context of talking about business or something from business and then allocating into real estate, which is super common and across, we've just been talking about Ronan's old firm, that were in peanuts. If you haven't read the book, read Alan Sugar's autobiography. It's one of the first books I read. I was super young when I read it and absolutely loved his story from growing from the ground up. He actually would take up the road planings that were little bits of timber, put them in a bag, and then sell them around his local estate as kindling wood for fires. And he would get, like small bits of change for each of them. But he was recycling a product that was not wanted, putting it in a marketplace that was wanted, and making a small fortune of it. But anyway, everyone knows Alan Sugar now because of the Apprentice. But to put things in perspective, he set up Amstrad, which was basically a computer manufacturing and stereo business, is how it started up. So he was in tech/IT. He ended up selling that business in 2007 for £125 million. He is now worth, from real estate investments, 1.66 billion from investments of his capital into real estate and growth. So predominantly his value is real estate and investing in the businesses, and obviously making it into the top 100 Sunday Times rich list. So he's like a bit of a beast, but he was always segueing some of his capital into the offices that he operated. Then he would buy another office and he would let that out, and so on and so forth. So
I think we pipped into the post on the Windsor one, by the way. Amstrad. Alan Sugar, yeah. I think his nephew was up for it, and
I think it's his son or son-in-law that's pretty active.
Yeah, he's the real estate purchaser. Got in there fast, mate. 9 days from offer to completion, so I had to move fast on it. But yeah, super proud of that site.
Nicely done, mate. Nicely done. All right, let's get back to Ronan. Sorry, but we're really good at derailing on this podcast. But right, we are now here. So Nuki Homes is your business, Ronan. You've given us the overview on the business now. So let's get on to this project.
This is down at Carney Village Square. So it started out about 40,000 square feet. It's now we'll finish off around 65,000 square feet. So on the far right hand side, the third building there, that was all offices plus retail on the bottom. So obviously offices isn't good now, so we've changed that to apartments. So we've 36 apartments in this scheme, a supermarket on the ground floor of the middle building, and a medical centre above it. The little white building to the right hand side is a pharmacy, and plus there's some ancillary retail, restaurants, salons, that sort of thing there. But that scheme there, about 65,000 square feet. I sold all the residential and I kept the commercial. And on this was one that got very challenging, but then we got through it, and I got out the far side, and it's doing well, or done well. But I had about just over 6 million owed here for end of January, whenever year it was, and sales were so slow, and I was like, I've no way out of this unless these sales come in. And on I went to the council 3 times, and on the third time, they they put in an offer, which we agreed, and that took me out. But without that, selling these to the public, it could have been different. We sold about 3 or 4 to the private market, and then the balance to the council. But there was a lot of sleepless nights there on that one. But we got through it, and then got out the far side. I've now been able to keep all the commercial assets, and we're just finishing the last block of 18 apartments on the right hand side now at the moment, and the rest of the ground floor is all fully leased. So that's down at Carney Village Square. Probably one of the larger ones I started from when I came back. It's probably about the 5th or 6th project around that.
Yeah, Ronan, what sort of discount, pence in the pound or cents in the euro? Would the council buy the stock from you at compared to market value?
I wasn't offering anything discount because there was people buying them, but I just needed it quick. And in Ireland at the moment, the government's buying everything. So 7 out of every 10 or 70% of everything being built is being purchased directly by not directly, by the council, either through the municipality, through the council, or through an AHB, which is an approved housing body. So ultimately, it's going back to the government. So here, I'd offered it a couple of times, and then in the last 6 months, for when I was delivering this, the government really got aggressive on buying out these units, and especially given these are apartments. So to answer your question, no discount. We got
nice
full market price. Yeah,
banging, mate, banging. And yeah, I don't know, can I draw on this? Maybe I can draw. No, I can't draw on this. But yeah, for anyone that can see this image, it's that furthest right building where you had a change of plan and then ended up doing an extra floor, was it, on the top and turned to apartments?
Correct. And no, you have to, the block of offices doesn't work, especially in this market. So residential as well is working, works quite well. So here I had no site costs left, I had no infrastructure costs, so it turned into a very sweet deal in the end. So we're just delivering out that now as we speak. But yeah, I done this with two banks. So initial phase was the block you see on the left, and then the middle block was the supermarket. And what I done to get the leverage there was I signed up a deal to a supermarket, a chain, prior to starting on site. That lease gave significant value, which allowed me to finance the rest of the deal, build it out, deliver these 18 units, deliver the supermarket, hand it over, finish all the car parking. Obviously, all the infrastructure was done as well. It's about a 2 acre site, and then it left me just with the last block to sort out. So, yeah, that's how that one happened, and now it's been delivered. So,
and Ronan, what's the construction on this? This is ICF, isn't it? That you done this one? Is it most of
the
stuff you
last
do?
block, the last block on the right is ICF. The other two blocks were traditional masonry construction. The supermarket itself was mostly structural steel and precast, but traditional masonry elsewhere.
Okay.
The far block has been done in ICF, so it's
Do you want to
something we've
explain
been
what
looking at
ICF
for a
is to
while.
the viewers?
So in situ concrete formwork, you essentially have two insulated panels either side creating the formwork, and then inside you're going to have a bit of rebar, and then you're going to pour it with concrete. So they come in blocks. You put them up like Lego. It's very, very fast, and we like it, especially when you're going up about 3-4 stories. It's great for that. It doesn't go at the moment above 6. I think you can do 5 of ICF with then light gauge steel on top of that, like LGS. So yeah, that model's working really good at the moment.
And how high can you build in ICF before you have to let it set and stuff? And what's the weather like working with it?
It's great. Like if you're doing traditional masonry, you build up to your joists, you put on your joists, you build up to your wall plate, and then you build your peaks. But generally your coursework is like 6 to 8 courses at a day, kind of. But if there's any wind, etc., it can get dangerous. Where with the ICF, you're just running it up. So we go straight up the wall plate. You put in your peaks, you pour it all. We can do 6 houses in a week with this. So 3 pairs of semi-detached units in a week, and that's bringing it from finished floors up to the peaks being done. So it's very, very quick if it works. Now, obviously, a lot of the stuff in Ireland is forward sold at the moment, again, to government. So it's easy to get the most out of it. If you're waiting for contracts to be signed, you're not getting the full benefit because you're stopping and starting. So masonry is a bit more controllable. But if you've them forward sold, ICF is a great model.
In and out.
Yeah, Matt.
And what's this one here?
Out.
This is a small commercial development. It's about 20,000 square feet. It was in a master plan of about 500 houses, 400 houses with a PLC in Ireland. And they were getting rid of all these commercial little sites, albeit I was finding great value in it. The developer on this occasion wanted 1.2 million. We negotiated down to 875. Got a Tesco box, as you see, that was already on it. There's about 10,000 square foot Tesco box, plus there is a small car park for 30 units. We seen an opportunity there that there was additional space in the site to the north of it, which was just zoned to a limited amount of things, but could take a medical centre. So we went in for planning on a medical centre, got it. Obviously rejigged the car park to allow now for 90 spaces, and that got straight through the council. So it was a great win, and something that the PLC didn't see, which was great for us. We knew what we were on about. We thought we had an angle there, and it turned out we did. So that one was leased to a UK supermarket chain. You can probably guess who it is. Oh, sorry, it says it on the screen, but yeah, we have a strong lease with them, and obviously good yields off those leases. So it's done quite well.
Yeah, bang. And just for anyone looking on the on video, we've got the floor plan up. Well, not the floor plan, the site plan up here. And so what Ronan did is bought this site without that white box at the top of the site, and just with this white box down here for the supermarket, and then found a way to sweat the asset and add value with this medical center, and then rejigged the site plan to then create more value out of the parking area. And that's ultimately what us SME developers need to do. Big PLCs don't have the time of day to try and sweat the asset, and we can come in and try and create more value.
See, what I love about what I love about what Ronan's done. What I love about what Ronan's done is, he's found treasure out of other people's trash. So he's worked with the big master plan. He's looked at the big developer. He's looked at something that's just almost like a bit of a headache for them. They just want to sell it. And he's looked at that site and gone, right, how can I get the most out of this as possible by adding more commercial units, creating a lower yield, increasing the value, is a real testament to Ronan. And that's pretty much a lot of his business plan now is to look at these sites, and that's really the values I've taken out of knowing him, is that actually there is so much value in knowing what to do in the commercial part. The one in Twickenham we were working on, we had a unit at the back on the ground floor and only half the ground floor commercial. And through speaking to Ronan and looking at it, it was like, you really need to sort of maximize the ground floor space, which we did. And actually by finding the right tenant on the ground floor, made the value of the whole building the same cost as the lease we just put in place on the ground floor tenant. So yeah, learning this next step in development, not being scared of commercial, and just like almost like these big developers don't want to know it. They build houses, they want to get them up, get them sold, get them up, get them sold. But actually learning this new skill set is where a lot of value can be added. So fair play, mate. Really, really
on
good.
that, Stu, as well, like what you'll find and what I found about these, like I mentioned, I call them posh sheds. There are 4 walls and a roof. Now I find there's a little bit more to it, but in terms of my delivery, I obviously build a building. I build everything outside, as you can see there, and finish it off. But internally, we don't do anything. It's shell and core. So I guess the same. I think it's a dentist you brought into yours. You're just doing
Yep.
shell and core. They bring the fit out in. They spend all the money on that, and you get the lease and a good yield.
600 grand of their money in our building. Yes, they want to be inside the act and they're going to own it, but if anything, and they're a fairly new business, but because their banks look at them as a really good cash flow and asset that, within sociable hours, it's a great addition to the site, as a whole, either to sell it on an exit or to hold it long term. But yeah, no, it's a game changer.
For me, I try and keep these as a pension. I brought an investor in on this deal, but like Tesco's as a covenant is exceptional. So whether if I want to flip that in the future to a fund or whatever, or I have about 4 of these now, if I flip that, there's a lot of people that will take that asset. So there's a couple of
Absolutely.
aspects here, but even from a pension point of view, it's an easy flow, and you never have to deal with it. It's a fully repair and lease, and it's a great covenant.
So you're basically saying more money and less work is effectively what the posh sheds are, aren't they?
Yeah, it's quick as well, because you're not doing all the finishes, which take time. Now your internals, your first fix, your second fix, your electricals, your plumbing, your certification. Fine, you're certifying the box. And sorry guys, I have a technical difficulty here with my podcast or AirPods, but
It actually sounds clearer.
okay.
It sounds clearer, yeah.
But yeah, that's, you have it in one, Stu. Yeah.
So one thing I was just about to jump on, because this is also quite big infrastructure-y stuff, but it's just like the small wins that you can have on these big sites. Like as Ronan said, he's added square footage and more commercial space on this site, but there's loads of other ways that I love about commercial and actually some of our resi sites that we sort of think about how can we really get a couple more wins on each and every site. So we think about Amazon drop boxes. They pay about £1,000 per year, plus add value to the site because you have more traffic. You've got solar parking. So where Ronan's got all those parking spaces, you can put solar canopies over all the parking spaces, which means when people get out in the rain, they're not getting wet while they're putting their kid in the pram. But it could also be used as something sold back to the grid, or alternatively charging on site if it's offices or resi. You can think about advertising boards and what you can fit on there. So whether it's boarding around the front of the site, you can think about dark kitchens. These are kitchens in basically shipping containers that don't have a retail outlet. They just cook for a Deliveroo. You can think about washing machines, the ones where you go almost like old laundrettes. They're like a bulk item. Companies come and rent the space off you. And then rent it in. Then last but not least is EV charging. So EV charging companies come, lease a car parking space off you, lease out the rent out the space for obviously charging, and all of these like incremental values that you can increase. And we've implemented on quite a few of our sites. Can take this from a Tesco, like 5% net yield to even more value just by squeezing and sweating that asset.
Yeah. Good nuggets there, good nuggets. And Ronan, you mentioned having a couple of these. So I think here is another one.
Yeah, this one is Tyrrellstown Neighbourhood Centre or Kilmartin. Again, I bought it from a PLC. This is a larger box. It's quite significant size. It's 60,000 square feet, or 54,000 to be exact. We have a value add position on this site. Again, I generally buy stuff with the view that I'll add some additional value to it. But this boils down to maybe 2 leases. You have a big supermarket of roughly 40,000 square feet, plus a medical centre above it, and then a couple of ancillary retail. So you'll have your pharmacy, your hair salon, etc. But really, to me, there's only 2 deals in this. Get your deal done with the supermarket and get a deal done with a medical operator. And we negotiated this for about 6 months. It was a hard deal to get through. I'd met the PLC privately to try and get the deal done, and they wanted to go public on it and do an open market bidding process. We won the bidding process, and we've concluded the deal now, and we're just getting on site in the next couple of weeks. We started initial enabling works, but we're getting on it soon enough. So yeah, like there's a large car park there, which was, you know, a bad use of the space in my view. So I've instructed my architect or my design team to get apartments to the north or to the west of the site as we're looking at it now. And now we have a layout for about 52 units on it. So again, the numbers stack given the existing box. So the value add would be significant here in order to, obviously, in getting that. But on the box itself, and something that JJ just touched on the roof has all these solar panels. I was like, oh God, do we need to put in these solar panels? Is it really required? And by the planning requirements, we do. But then I explored it, and now what we're going to do is we're going to lease the power that provides and send it back to the grid, but actually get a company to lease all them solar panels. So it's another lease, it's another yield multiple. So again, it's picking out those opportunities and maximizing them. So here, yeah, it's a good deal. This one's about 54,000. You have Donacarney Village Square. Of the 65,000, there's about 25,000 of commercial, and then in Navan there's about 20 or just under 20 there. So what's that? About 95,000 square feet. So they're assets I like to hold on to.
And then this one here.
Yeah, Circuit Apartments. So I've agreed to buy this site subject to a court order in favour of developing it out. It's 200 units, lovely site from a strategy point of view as well. It's 5 blocks, so it's predominantly 37 units in each of the blocks, with the block 1 there being 53 units. So I really see this as, 5 large houses. It's 4 stories, 5 stories tall. We'll do it in ICF. It's very similar to the blocks we're doing in Donacarney. But from a strategy point of view, it's a great site. We're not having to build 120 units before you get your check for the first door. You can build block per block if you want to or if you need to. So we'll go in there with a civils package, bring everything up to finished floor level, and then build it out. But the likes of these developments here in Ireland, they're all going to be government purchases. I don't know of any apartment blocks in Ireland at the moment that are not being forward purchased by government, just because the expense of building them is so high that people aren't going to get mortgages on them that are trying to buy them. So the government is taking on these assets. So that's the strategy on this one. Hope to start it in about Q3 or Q4 of this year, and knock it out ideally in one phase rather than leaving any block behind.
Banging. And then that's just another CGI.
Just a couple of visuals of it there, yeah.
Banging. And that's just to give a good idea to any of those viewers watching this who are regular viewers. That gives you an idea of what Ronan's on with, the kind of property deals he does. And it's another vertical to this podcast where, none of us are working in commercial at that kind of scale that Ronan's working at, especially not in another jurisdiction as well. So you will see Ronan more on this pod. So bringing another perspective, which is great. Now I have some selfish questions to ask, just to understand, bringing it really down to basics, just to understand the difference of Ireland to the UK, or to England particularly. So buying a house, just super basic, buying a house. If you buy a house in the UK...
I think it's pretty much just straightforward, same as Ireland, as the UK. You obviously get mortgage approval, you go in, you buy the house, you get your mortgage, you get your valuations done. That's straightforward. Where it gets slightly different is the planning process. Albeit our planning process is constrained, in the UK it's just a different ballgame altogether. But buying a house is generally exactly the same, I think, as in the UK.
So you still have the equivalent of your land registries, and you still have to go through the conveyancing process, local searches, and TR1s.
Yeah, and like your solicitors pick that up. But like if you're just private buyer, you're going into a show house, obviously there's a reputable developer behind it, you've agreed to purchase whatever house it is, whatever house type, and you just get in with your solicitors. The probably thing that's frustrating here, it takes about 8 or 10 weeks as a rule of thumb to close. Like there's no reason really this shouldn't take 2 weeks or less. That really bugs me, but that's just a process. But yeah, I think that's relatively how it's done in the UK. So it's pretty much the same on that.
So what is it about the planning process then? So just to reiterate for those watching at home, in England, I mean, there's so many different ways that you can engage with the council with, pre-applications. You might not even need planning. You might just be Class MA or prior approval, or let's just say you're going to get planning on converting an office into, or not an office, something that doesn't benefit from PD, but you're converting it into apartments. You can submit a pre-application and consult with the council prior to spending all the money on a full application. Then it's a full application, and you go into validating the application with different surveys you might need. And then you've got the consultative process with the council and the officers. It may then go to committee under recommendation, or it may go through to a decision at the end. If you lose it, then you might have to appeal it and go for a 9-month appeal process. That sort of rough explanation of our planning system. Is it the same there? Where does it differ?
Yeah, I suppose the big difference, the big takeaway from meeting you guys over the last couple of years is the timeline. So in Ireland, you typically have 8 weeks. You submit your planning, you have 8 weeks. You'll have a decision by the council, your local municipality. 4 weeks after that, after 12 weeks, you'll have a final grant. So after that 8 weeks, if someone has put in commentary about it, or there's an issue with it, they can then appeal what the council has issued out as their guide on what they're going to do, whether they're going to approve it or not. And then if there's no appeals, they then issue the final grant. If it gets appealed, it goes into about another 16 weeks with Bord Pleanála, and it can get stuck in JRs and other things. But in theory, there's about an 8-week window, a 12-week window to get a final grant, and then a 16-week window, I think, if it's appealed. But the big difference between that and the UK is those timelines are adhered to here, whereas in the UK, you could be 2 years waiting for a grant. We do pre-planning meetings here as normal. So you go in and just say, look, this is what we're thinking of the site. What does the planners of the county think about the site? And any issues that they might have, can we address them now? But yeah, I think I've shown in the likes of the Donaghcarry development, where we change it from commercial to residential. I showed JJ and Stu at the time. We submitted it around, I think it was October or so, and 8 weeks later we did a grant, and 12 weeks, 4 weeks beyond that we had a final grant. So in 3 months, in what's that, 4 months, we had a full grant. So there's other issues. It's not that easy. For larger projects over 100 units, you have what used to be an SHD process, strategic housing development. Now you have a large scale residential planning system. So you submit your planning, it goes through a process, but what's happening now in a lot of them now, these developments, is they're going into judicial reviews where it's appealed into the High Court. And another odd thing about Ireland is if you are living 200 miles away, you can appeal any planning decision. So if JJ is going in to put an extension onto his house, some guy down in Cork could appeal it, even though it's no material effect on him whatsoever.
Really?
So that's a
People
bit odd.
do that.
Oh, of course. And people just dress it up to say that it's someone from Cork, but really it's a neighbour and he's just using his cousin or something. But yeah, so there's a couple.
You are all cousins over there, aren't you?
Detached, but yeah. Look, there's nuances, but when I look at both, at least we can get decisions. Albeit there's frustration on the judicial review issue and High Court process, but. In the UK, I know even in Northern Ireland, it's on the UK planning system, and I know someone that's developing up there, and he's letting two years to get a decision. Like,
so you're 7 months, are you, from application or
12 weeks. So,
worst case?
You're about 3 months. 3 months, but worst case,
3 months with the planning, then appeal. 7 months. So, and what about like seal and 106 and fees and contributions to the council? What are they like in Ireland?
Yeah, you fight your fees in any normal market. You have contributions, you'll have planning fees, you'll have all of that. Now, in order to stimulate more residential houses being built, the government said if you start on site by such a date, like if you start by 2024. We will waive all the contributions to encourage more units being delivered. Then they just recently extended that up to 2025 now, so that was huge. That's a big incentive. You have stamp duty, so you have 7.5% stamp duty. So the commercial stuff, 7.5% is pretty deep.
That is killer.
On
Yeah,
sale or on
on sale.
purchase?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even on resi, now you can reclaim the resi. I think 72 or 73% of that in the resi, but on commercial, it's hammered it. And what happened was there was a lot of funds coming into Ireland buying up or hoovering up huge apartment blocks, and there was a bit of an outcry to say, well, they're buying all these blocks, so people, private residents or private citizens can't go in and buy it because they're competing against these large funds. But you need them large funds in the market to build these apartment blocks and to fund them, because the banks aren't going to take that amount of risk. So they put in this 7.5 stamp duty on the back and had to try and discourage it, and it did. They couldn't make their yields work. Then when the inflation took off, then it just took them out. So the PRS is kind of left for the moment, and as such, that's why the government now, if it's apartment blocks, that's why the government have to build them. Without the government involvement now, they just won't be built.
And what's the stamp for company purchase?
I'm not sure if there's any difference because you're transacting on a site. I'm not sure though, Stu.
Oh, okay.
All right, and then
Wow.
I'd buy everything in an SPV, so as part of any structure like that. So I think it's the same. I think it's just 7.5%.
so what would you give, Ronan? So let's say one of us was like, I'm going to move shop. I'm going to go over to Ireland. I'm going to start doing what I'm doing here over there, commercial to resi. I'm going to take some commercial buildings, turn them to apartments for the private rented market. What would your immediate advice be?
Go in and get a good architect under you that knows the environment well or knows the process well. Feel out a few sites, and then start off. I think if I was going into any site, like if I went into England, which I'd like to go into, I'd start off probably a little bit smaller, a very comfortable size of a site, and then throttle my way on from there, because you're going to learn the new systems. If you borrow the money and you're planning to get out in 2 years, that doesn't work in the UK system because you could get stuck. So I would say look at buying what's called a consented site in the UK, but in Ireland try and get one with planning, and just start from there. Obviously speak to a couple of the main banks, see what your leverage position is, what you're going to get up to in LTVs, loan to values, and then see what you want to do. You're likely going to want a local contractor. Has the architect got a contractor? Do you want the local architect's contractor? Because there might be a bit of a not arm's length. So I would tender with 3 contractors possibly and just get on with it. But the entry point is a little bit higher here. We don't have HMOs. They're illegal. They're called bed sits. As a result, the entry point is just that bit higher. You're generally starting off with a couple of houses as opposed to... Now, you can renovate stuff, but not to the same extent as a HMO works in the UK.
Yeah, gotcha. I mean, guys, Stuart and Jack, any other questions specifically for Ronan? If not, we've got audience questions to go to.
I've got a couple of questions. Love it, Ronan. I actually did a little bit of went down a rabbit hole for myself using the amount of units that you've got in your pipeline, just to give people a bit of an understanding of what you're actually delivering. So you've got 850 resi units in your pipeline.
Yes.
So if you take Ireland's population, which is 5.17 million, and added your pipeline divisible by the population, that means that you will be building housing for 0.01% of Ireland. So if there was 1,000 Ronans out there, you would house Ireland.
Wow,
which is pretty
I think
impressive.
the largest developers in Ireland are doing about 2,000 units a year now. So that's going to take me 3 to 4 years to deliver, Jack. And as we say, I need runway. So of that 850, I'll have to keep adding to that. As it might sound bizarre, but like you just have to build on runway. So and in that there's 2 large sites. There's one in Navan, and then there's the 200 at Southgate. So there's 2 significant sites which have brought that number up quite a lot. I would have been regularly doing 30 to 50 units, that type of size of site. Now it's got larger, which is good because it's a little bit easier. The numbers are, when they're higher, it's easier to get a good team. Your overheads are easier to cover because you've big sites on. The small ones need the same amount of, you need a foreman, you need a design guys, etc. But the larger scale stuff, it's just an easier multiple.
Ronan, mate, super impressed. I love getting to know you, and the
Love
more
it.
I find out about your
Love it.
business, the more impressed I am. My main questions, I think, I like to try and get on the podcast is about the mindset. So obviously, you're totally focused, you're totally passionate, dedicated to where you want to go. Why are you so passionate, and where is the end goal? Where's the end goal? Where do you look back when you're in your
Yeah, I
grey hair
suppose I
moments?
really like to build something that's going to outlive me. So, and obviously, when you drive by a development and there's families playing in it, it's like you've created that opportunity, you've taken the risk to deliver that, and I really enjoy that. Um, the money side of things, fine. Development, if you do it well, you can make a lot of money. But it's not really the driving force. I suppose it's good to do something in the community that people, there's a huge need for housing. In terms of the commercial, I just like that. I really like having it as a pension. I just see it as straightforward. Plus, I love a deal. I absolutely love a deal. So for me, initially, I just like developing it out and seeing you've brought something to the community that's going to outlive you, whether it be this supermarket stores or whatever, or, any of these residential developments. But you're always chasing a deal, and I love being able to pull a deal together and maybe pull in a couple of investors, and you get it across the line. It's just very exhilarating, and then obviously delivering it out, producing a good product. I love that. I like being able to drive by it, and so that went well. As difficult as they all are, that's what I get out of it.
Ronan, would you
Your maker.
consider yourself a natural entrepreneur?
I think so. I have some other ancillary stuff that I do, but yeah, I suppose we all talk the same language. We're all about pushing and trying to do more. So I'd be good for spotting deals, whether it be in different industries or whatnot. And I'm not afraid to have a go. So I suppose by not being afraid to have a go makes you a bit of an entrepreneur too. You have to take some risks, and like yourself, when you guys are first starting out, you just say just fucking get on with it. Give yourself a chance. And that's what I've done, and luckily it's paid off. But it doesn't come without its challenges. But yeah, I think like probably the commercial is another part of my bow. We do we've a lettings business as well, which my wife now looks after. We've about 100 units in that. So there's a couple of other things there. I'm doing something with a development group now in Dublin, the Westbury Hotel. There are a couple of ventures I like.
What
Amazing.
would you say your biggest risk you've taken so far, or maybe the biggest risk that didn't go quite to plan, and then how did you dig yourself out of it? You look back over your last.
The large one, the Donacarney Village Square project was the most intense one for me for sure to date. I had about 1.2 million put into it in cash. At one point, I could have possibly lost that, and I ended up getting through it, sitting down with the banks. Obviously, COVID came and inflation went up by 15-17%. About 15% is what I got hit for, and I didn't have the money to finish it out. So we had to sit down, look at an exit. They had to believe in me to see what my process was going to be to get them out, and they agreed with my process, and they ended up getting more money out of the deal, and everybody got their money back plus more. And luckily for myself, I ended up being able to still keep it, and now I'm delivering the last block on that. But that was where I was most exposed. That in another event, another time, I might have just got wiped out.
Was that Ronan? Was that your crossing the valley moment? Was that the moment where?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because I had so much at risk, and when we're so aggressive when we're starting, you kind of, not that you have to be is the wrong word, but you're trying to build up to a certain size, and if that went wrong, I would have been starting from scratch again. So that was very challenging, but we got through it. I suppose not to panic was the main thing there, and then sit down and just have have a bit of reality of how you're going to build this out, how you're going to finish it out, and is that conceivable? And obviously I had to do that with the banks, and they said yes, your plan is the best plan on our cards for the moment, and we went ahead with it and we executed it luckily enough, and it turned out great. So that was my crossing of the.
Did you get much resistance? Did you get much resistance in those meetings? Because it must have been a case of someone knows best, and you're trying to present the best light.
6 million, so like it's beyond a couple of million. It's as much their problem as it is my own. But like, I'm not saying it in that way. At the end of the day, I want to stand by the site. I want to stand by my decisions, and I want to stand by the product I'm developing. So we built a beautiful product. It's just the numbers with the inflation caught us out. So the alternative, I suppose, for the bank was maybe to put someone else in, but that would have had to go through courts and whatever else. And I put up a very real plan of how we could get through this, and I executed on it. So I was proud of getting through that as well, and obviously then retaining the assets, which was really just a sweetener, and now it's turned into a great site. So, like the commercial aspect, the last block, which was offices, that hadn't even been conceptualized for residential at the time because it was a different phase. So luckily when I got through phase one, the last block, then I had no site costs left, I had no infrastructure costs left, and got the planning through for residential. So it made it a great site in the end. But I wouldn't have got there if I didn't get through the first part. And it was like hanging around yourselves that encouraged me to just keep pressing on with that.
Cherry on the cake. Cherry on the cake. I've got. Sorry, my signal cut out earlier. I've got more of a personal question about your sort of day to day and how you find work life balance, because obviously you're super sharp. You alluded to entrepreneurialism, and we always say that you never not working. You're always thinking. But give the listeners a bit of an idea of how you tend to structure your weeks and your days, and where you find sort of solitude outside of work.
As you say, JJ, you're never off. You're always kind of switched on to seeing deals. Even if you're driving past something at the weekend, you see a site, you're always thinking about it. And I think as you own a company, you're a bit of an entrepreneur. You're always kind of processing stuff in your head and trying to get through deals and how you're going to structure deals. So that's always going on. But I like to try and put a few things in to try and stop that, or like to spend family time and doing that. But my usual week is like we're all the time prospecting for sites and all is now prospecting for investors. So last week I was in London for the day, met a couple of hedge funds on about bringing in some equity. So they're exciting times. I like doing that, and I'm always out trying to buy sites. In terms of physically work on site, I have a good team around me now, so they generally look after what I call downstream. I look after the upstream, acquiring the sites, finding the money, get to a point of delivery of getting on site, and then it goes into the construction team, which is led at the moment by Derek, who's a vastly experienced guy on the ground. And then obviously at the end of that downstream process are the sales, which I come back in on. But look, we're there every week for progress meetings and design meetings. I've quite a linear team in terms of my design guys. I've, for good or bad, a lot of the same consultants on all of my jobs. I just find it's an easier way to spend my time rather than having 4 different meetings for 4 different projects or whatever. I'm having one meeting on a Tuesday for all of them. So it's a better use of my time. But now it's the summer and I play a bit of golf, so it's not all fun and games. There's a bit of fun and games with it. Every Thursday now I try and play golf, so we'll be dead long enough. I try to play at 1 or 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. It just splits up my week, and get round with a few other guys who are working locally. I do that. But yeah, typically my Monday to Friday is all about finding sites and raising more funds.
What about family life? You got wife and kids commitments?
Yeah, wife and a little baby Ellie. She's 7 months old, so having great fun with her and seeing her grow. So I try to put the phone down around 7 or 8 o'clock and leave in a different room. And I think it even helps from a sleep point of view. But we were just away for the weekend there. We went over Friday afternoon to County Clare and stayed there for the weekend just with family and chilling out. So I love that as well. And it's so important. Family's everything, but of course you have to get the milk and the bread into the fridge, and I've chosen this profession. So
Ronan, just on that point as well, mate. Just on that point. So yeah, you went away for the weekend. Do you ever get that Monday morning anxiety again? I know obviously you work for yourself for many years now. And the reason I say that is I was off on Friday for a family wedding. So I've had Friday. Oh, there she is. Hello, Ellie.
Hello.
Oh, bless her.
Hello, Ellie.
Oh, what a cutie. I was just saying that obviously I was at a family wedding on Friday. So I've had Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday was obviously Father's Day. So I've had 3 days off. And last night I really struggled to stop the mind from going round and round, just thinking about the last 72 hours and what I haven't done and what I need to do this week. And obviously it's now Monday morning, 6:30, 7 o'clock. We're on here for a few hours. My phone isn't going off the hook and I feel pretty comfortable now. But last night I do get that that feeling of, and I think we should do it with Dorian as well, because I know he gets it on a Sunday evening, where it's not anxiety like you need to report to someone. It's just there's a lot to do, and
Yeah,
I don't like
think
wasting time.
I found that a lot, and I've probably went on the far end of it, the wrong end of it. I've been thinking about it too much and trying to find a process to stop that. So you're in bed, and what I find in bed is everyone's quiet, the baby's down. It's a great time to think, and it shouldn't be, but I sometimes get caught out just thinking too much. But I do a simple thing, just from my own perspective. For each of the sites, I have notes on my phone. So one site will have, its own, one project will have its own notes, and I'll go in, if I get anything into my head, I'll jot them in, and just say tomorrow can wait, and look at it from that point of view. I just think the rabbit just keeps going round in the wheel. So that's what's worked for me. Each of my projects have their own little diary, shall we say, and any points I need to raise or think about, I just jot them in and focus on it later in that week.
In the morning.
I also put in slots in my diary where I'm purely just looking at strategy, or looking at resolving aspects on certain sites. I'll be quite good at that. Like, avoid the phone, just get through them. I've recently scaled up now. I've got a PA and EA that looks after my diary, as well as I've got a design manager and a few other guys that have joined me. So that's important. It's given me more time to really focus on things that are valuable, and more better time spent for me in respect of the business, but also on a personal side. But yeah, that's generally what works. But I did get caught up, Stu, in just mustering so much stuff at night, and you need your sleep. Your sleep is so powerful. And never get away from getting that, because we're in a stressful business, so it's very important you get some good sleep as well.
I find that I know Jack's kind of similar to this, but I find that those Sundays, they're one of the best ways to kind of exercise that built up energy, which usually is because you've got this like kind of blissful moment where you want to take action on stuff because your mind's building up, but no one else is working. There isn't much you can really do on a Sunday. So a creative outlet can sometimes be a good way to make the most of that energy, but still being productive. Like, some people like painting or making music, and that can be one way to deal with it. But I like going into our software systems or into some ideas that we have for growth or other bits. And I like to sort of play around with stuff and just try and bit of an exercise of hubris, where you kind of go, okay, well, what if we do this and do that, and try and find weak spots in our business, or try and find a new way to deliver content for the next week, or stuff that otherwise wasn't on the agenda, but can make a Sunday worth it by almost a bit of admin, just a bit of a cleanup task, but also adding in a bit of creativity to try and stimulate the brain, stop it from spinning around 1,000 miles an hour, staring at a brick wall. Because the worst thing is just, you sat down and the TV's on, someone's got the TV on, and you just see the Sunday just going into this like abyss of unproductivity. And you're like, I've got Monday tomorrow and I don't want to start on this tone, which is probably something we're all cursed with. But I think a creative outlet where you can either work on your business on stuff that otherwise the busy week doesn't let you do, so you can catch up on the housekeeping stuff and even get creative with it, or just actually do something creative where you might go trampoline park if you're into that stuff as a grown man, or you might go climbing or go on a run, or something where you can let those energies flow. I think if you try and bottle them up, or try and stop yourself and go, no, I'm not going to do that, I'm going to sit down with a family, or I'm not going to do that, I'm going to do this thing. If your mind doesn't want to be there, you end up being a nuisance to those people around you, and people don't want to be around your company. I don't know if you agree with that.
I just blamed it on the Diet Coke I had about 9:30 watching the football. I just thought, midnight. They definitely put something in that Diet Coke, mate, to make your brain start spinning at fucking 1 o'clock in the morning.
Start spinning around. Well,
It's very important to create your home time and then your work time, and like things that need to be happening in the week can happen in the week, and let them wait. And it's very difficult because we're so aggressive to just say, I want to wait. We're not used to being told to wait. So we want to answer it now, we want to dictate now, but we need to control ourselves. Sorry, what I found is I need to control myself to wait for the Monday or Tuesday, whenever slot I picture that in, to deal with it. It's better for me in the long run.
Yeah. And then, guys, can we get on to a couple questions? We've got some lovely audience members who've sent in some questions. And I think this one here is probably quite good for this podcast, because the question is from James Reeve. Thank you for your question. And for anyone listening at home, if you want us to answer anything in thorough detail, feel free to drop a comment on the YouTube channel. or on any other platform with our @GroundUpPod at name. But ideally, the YouTube channel, we can pick them up easy, and we will go in deep on those questions. And the more detail you give us, the more we can help out. So James Reeve has asked, great episode. I'd love to hear more about your process for commercial to residential conversions. James is doing one and wants some tips and advice on what to look for. So James, that's quite a vague question because there's so many ways you could skin that cat, but maybe we could each do a quick 101. Maybe a quick 101 on commercial to resi conversions, starting blank canvas. What are the steps? What are the things to look out for? Starting with Stu.
Yeah, mate. Definitely, I like to buy in prime locations because it's going to attract the most amount of commercial interest on the ground floor unit. I've really changed my strategy now to anchor in a really strong commercial tenant on the ground floor that will stabilize and secure the asset. I like to buy near train stations just because obviously there is minimum amount of parking on these sites. So bus stops, train stations, local town and amenities to use. And really try and go 2-3 floors high. I mean, you've got Class G where you can put 2 units above most commercial units, even I think they're in A and OBs as well, and certainly conservation areas, or Class MA where you can squeeze as many items in. And the reason I like to try and stay below sort of 3 units above ground, which is effectively floors from the ground floor, is it's a lot easier with the 18-meter rule and working at heights and secondary staircases, sprinklers. You can obviously introduce lobbies and use the space that's there, as long as you take it into account when you're working out your space planning, to get as many units on those floors above as possible. And it's just a generally easier site. And then the next thing I would look for is the building type. So you've got Victorian units, which obviously come with more risk and more pain, but generally a better looking asset that's lasted 200 years, and it will have definitely that curb appeal for people who want to rent either the commercial unit or the flats above. Or the bank we're doing at the moment is a 1970s concrete ring beam block, which is a lot more cost effective to build. I'm really excited to get to the end of that one, so I can sort of do a price analysis on the Victorian units and the newer build blocks, because just simply the fire regulations, the sound, everything's a lot easier in a concrete ring beam construction. So we're just taking all this knowledge and we're trying to work out what is the best commercial to resi type. And I think looking at the numbers at the moment, that the 1970s, 3 floors above ground, next to or in a town centre or near train stations, will be effectively what I'm out there in the market looking to buy.
Nice. Ronan, what would you say? Commercial to resi apartments 101.
For buildings, just keep it long and skinny is the kind of rule of thumb. Natural light is a big item for conversions, especially if some people are trying to buy a big square block, just doesn't work. So know your field. But as touched on, I'd be one for kind of keeping some of the retail on the ground floor. I think it's a great way of maximizing your value if you can get away with it. If you can make something that works in that area. So that would be my 2 simple rule of thumbs there.
And Jack?
Good. I mean, there's some key points have already been mentioned, and as you said, Rye, this we could probably talk for about 10 hours on this between us. We always try and get the prior approval consent for something before exchange to help with funding. Don't base your build costs on a square footage or square meterage, because each unit should come with a bit of a cost to itself. So what I mean by that is you could have 10 37 meter square flats, or you can have 10 2-bed flats, and the pound per square foot rate is going to be completely different for those two, because you've got more density in another. So pound per square foot rates don't work the same necessarily as they do on new builds. So we work both on a pound per square foot, but also on a unit rate. As well as talking about build costs, make sure that you analyze things like windows. A lot of people discredit new windows going in with a change of use. Services and mechanical engineering can be super expensive because you're obviously manipulating an existing building for a new use. Think about externals and design in that too, and sort of looking at ceiling heights, raised access flooring, whether you need diamond core drilling, where the services are going in the building, has it already got a riser? All of those things can either make or break a deal if you don't have your numbers dialed down, especially at scale. Ronan's already mentioned it. Your gross development values are going to be compromised against a new build block of flats because you're repurposing something. You haven't got the same lighting. You might have to actually work pretty heavy with a deep footplate and see how you can manipulate the building to be more complementary for light. Also, it was probably an office or something else, so the landscaping and the externals is going to feel like that. So have a budget in for softening the approach, maybe putting in some features on the building to make it feel a lot more residential and the surrounding area. Speed is a big one for us. So when you're, like Ronan mentioned, he's building his blocks out at the same rate of sales rate. So every time he can sell a block of flats, he's building them out, and he's strategically moving around the site so that he can sell the units as he's building them out. When you buy a commercial building, you can't part finish it. You've got to basically knock it out. You can build show flats and you can try and sell off plan. But in a market, in certain areas, you kind of need a finished product in some instances, especially if you're selling to locals and not overseas. So I'd highly recommend that you think about the speed and the timeframes that you've got to deliver the stock at, and also bringing that amount of stock to that market is a key. Last but not least, Stuart mentioned location. A lot of these buildings work really well because there's not new real estate going up in town centres and in good locations. So use it to your advantage. If you're repurposing an existing building in an existing place, make sure it is in a good location, because you may find, which we've got with we bought a 17,000 square foot office building we're converting to residential flats. There isn't a comparable for a converted building because no other conversions have happened in the town. It's all happened a couple of miles away because that's the nature of the building. So use that to slightly your competitive advantage, because you will be compromised on design repurposing that. But I hope that was useful. I mean, we could go on forever, couldn't we?
Yeah, we could go on for a while. And the boys have touched on a lot of relevant points there. The only thing I'd say that if you're starting to do commercials resis, don't do what's considered a large scheme, which is 15 units or more in the UK, because then it's by default going to go to committee. And also you just start to tie yourselves in all kinds of different compliance and challenges, and the sheer cost of borrowing and other things. When it's a new model for you, it's not a good idea. So I'd say 5 to 10 apartments is what you want to look at. Ideally, relatively light touch. If you can get Class MA, PD, office to resi, then that's probably a better way to do it. How can you de-risk your entry point and wet the palate with a commercial to resi, but without diving straight into something where you might see this great building that in principle works, but if you've not been through the ring of that conversion before, Jack picked up on a few things then, like your risers, your incoming feeds, and just the external envelope of the building. Is it cladded? What's the cavity like? There's so much that goes into retrofits. They're way harder than new builds in some aspects, which is contrary to what the layman person would think, where, well, you've got an existing building, surely it's easier than a new build. No. It's like much, much harder. It's the complete opposite. A new build is, imagine it's a blank canvas, and whatever's drawn on the floor plans by the architect is pretty much what you get to build. It's only in the ground where you've got uncertainties. Whereas with a conversion, if it's not fully stripped out when you buy it, then you don't know what's behind some of those walls. You don't know what the build-up is. There might be some subsidence that you might have to, your M&E runs could be all over the place. There could be steel beams and other things to work through. A lot of practical implications that can make your prediction on what you think the cost will be and what you think the delivery will be, and they just completely obliterate them at some point in the project. So start small, 5 to 10 units. Daylight, you want to look at the building and go, can that be a residential building? Can you really see that being apartments? Sometimes that's all it really needs, is you just look at it and go, can that really be apartments, or am I trying to make something work that's never really going to work?
Or would you live there? Or
Yeah,
would you live there? That's the way I analyze it.
When you're doing those jobs, I presume all the time you're just assuming you're going straight back to brick.
Yeah,
always.
Yeah. You're not retaining anything.
There's so many unknowns. You just have to assume you're ripping the whole thing out. And then if you're going up certain floors, you have to consider, is there an elevator required for residential units? So that's another big item.
I would also consider we've actually started just putting elevators in anyway because it helps sell them.
Yeah, but Henley can afford elevators, mate. There's other areas out there that's like 3 or 4 floors high. In fact, I purposely try and build under 4 floors because, again, would I live there and would I want to run all my shopping up, or would I've put audio visual entry systems so the Amazon guy can run my shopping up for me or whatever. But yeah, I don't really want to get involved with elevators too much because it's 120 grand for one that's going to break and it's going to cause you more of an asset management issue over time from use than it would be worth.
Once it's sold, I don't care.
Yeah, that's the difference. I hold, and I've got the headache long term, so I'd rather not have the problem.
And the reason you're putting for senior living, I'm assuming, JJ.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of our buyers are what we call downsizers. So they're
Brilliant.
they're
Great stuff.
living in a multi-million-pound house, selling up because kids have fled. They're 60, 65 years old. They're thinking about how they're going to get to that flat on the top floor. So it's just to give us the best exit options. As a contingency. My view is actually, and we have this rule for quite a few things, rather than building a list of positives, build a list of negatives and try and cross every single one of them out. And that's the best way we come to finish our schemes and from a design and delivery perspective.
Are you putting a lift in
Nice.
Tame?
Yeah.
You are putting a lift in, because that's quite a wide, long building as well. So you must be putting a few lifts
Yeah.
in then if you're going to do one
Yeah.
in each end.
So I think there's only 6 flats that don't benefit from lift access out of 20.
Wow.
Nice.
What's your cost of lift? About 60 grand all in? 30
Yeah,
bucks?
a rule
grand
of
a
thumb
floor?
is I think it's 30k plus 10 grand a floor.
Yeah.
30 goes to
Alright.
for. All right. And then there's another question that someone asked, which ties into something else you said. Yes. And it's this one. So Edward English, thank you for your question. Said, really enjoy the podcast, boys. Great knowledge from you all. A question for Stuart. You mentioned about realizing the power of a commercial tenant within your blocks. Could you expand on this? I'm currently looking at a property which has full planning for conversion of the upper floors and keeping the commercial unit. So, yeah, let's
Well, I
maybe
mean, it's pretty
finish on
much-
this question.
Pretty much this whole episode, really, isn't it? I mean, maximizing that tenant, which is a topic that Ronan knows better than myself. But where I was trying to shy away from commercial, because I just didn't understand enough about it, and then actually the penny dropped to realise once I realised the yield was reduced, the increase of the property would go up based on the cash the building was producing, and the stronger the tenant, the lower the yield, the more money. Then it has become so clear that I need to be looking at buying prime real estate in good locations that's going to attract the most amount of people. To give you an idea, at Windsor, which I won't talk too much on who the tenant is now, but we had like 10 inquiries for that building because the location is directly opposite Windsor Castle. It's a beautiful site. It's next to HSBC that's been owned by the banks for 250 years. It didn't matter over that 250-year period how wealthy you were, how privileged you were. No one was buying that asset because the banks just weren't going to sell it. And now, because obviously the way the market's moved, this is a redundant building. It is quite dark and it's quite deep. We've got the potential, well, we have got the potential, which we're going through the pre-app process now, to put 2 flats on the higher floor, which we'll look to do, which are effectively 3 flats because we've got the ground floor, the basement and the first floor. The reason it's taken us 4 months to go out to market to find the right tenant is because the building needs to really maximize on the value by the commercial tenant we've put in, and which we think we've made the right decision now because they actually wanted the whole first floor when we were going to look at splitting it. Again, I'm always on a residential mindset of trying to get as many units in there as possible, but the actual GDVs for residential in Windsor is not as attractive as having a good commercial tenant in that site. So anyway, we've designed it now, so we've got the whole first floor and ground floor and basement going to the commercial tenant, which is basically now valued the building at about 60, 70 grand more than what we've paid for it. But that leaves the second floor and the third floor, which have got tremendous views over the castle, which is effectively free real estate that we can go in there, spend 100, 120 grand a unit, create 2 £500,000 flats. I mean, even if they're only 1 beds, the views will pay for them. And then we can have a bit of fun on the booking.com and the Airbnb. And I'll be tapping Ryan up for a bit more advice on this. But I've always wanted to get in the Airbnb market, but I just didn't want to take the risk or take the energy, but it may take to run another operational business. But because of the location and the fact that I can go and take the wife or family or our friends go and stay in these units that are free effectively once they're built, because we'll refinance them and keep the yield low, to get low gearing on them. So it's not too much of a risk. But yeah, it's just a great building, and that's all on a play on the commercial side. So I'm now purposely going out there looking for buildings, and I'm also got a list of some big southeast commercial tenants that are looking. I've got like a map now with all the bullseye postcodes of where they want to set up shop. So I'm actually going out there actively speaking to land agents to find sites that fit my residential criteria that will also fulfill the commercial tenant. Because if we can find the site and like Ronan does and get that commercial tenant almost on the same day of completion, where we've secured that, the lending will be a lot cheaper. And the confidence into those schemes will be there. So yeah, I definitely think learn about commercial and watch other people who are doing it and learn from them.
Yeah.
Can I just touch on more generally speaking? Stuart talks about like the value of a commercial tenant, but just generally speaking, for the difference between a residential tenant and a commercial tenant. A commercial tenant occupies a building and has a full repairing lease, so they take responsibility for the building and have to return it in the same or better condition once the leases end. They sign longer leases, so there's less management to refill those voids and backfill them. And if they don't pay rent, you can change the locks on the door and tell them to F off and put a new tenant in there that pays rent. Comparing that to a residential tenant, they have use of fair wear and tear, so that they don't bring the property condition back to what it originally was. They actually tire the property, and you would probably need to upgrade or refurbish that property. They have every right to stay there, even if they're not paying rent, and you can't, get a monetized tenant in the building paying rent. And they tend to sign shorter leases, so there's more aggro and preparation around keeping the tenants there and keeping it full. So if you look at the value on time and value on cost return, I thought that was just relevant to bring up instead of just purely looking at the value of that prospective tenant.
Well, the reason the yields are lower is because the headache for the banks, if you've got a strong blue chip company that's got a balance sheet of say 40 million, they're going to be paying your 100 grand or an 80 grand a year rent effectively, and they pay it quarterly in advance as well, and they also are full FRI, so they fully insure it, repair it. So all you're doing is you're giving them the asset, and then they're giving you the income, and it's a real simple transaction. And like Jack said, if they don't pay their bills, I think it's within 28 days or 21 days, you literally can just go and change the locks, kick them out, and everything inside the building you own as well. So and at the end of the contract or end of the lease, once they've moved out, there's something called dilapidation, so they need to put right the building. And if they can't be bothered, or it's a bank and they just want to hand the building over, you get a dilapidation surveyor in there. They'll tell you what needs to be put right, and then that money will be negotiated with the old tenant and yourself, which you then pocket and then use to repurpose the building effectively. So there's some great little gems with commercial.
The power and the leverage. Like if you were just talking straight numbers, if you have a rent of £1 million is a round number, and you get a 6% yield, a 6%. If the market's going to buy that at a cap rate of 6%, so you're buying at a 6% yield. That value on that €1 million is about 16.5 million, and on a 5% yield, which is just a percent lower, is 20 million. Mm-hmm. So even if we were to reduce that down to 100,000, let's say my medical centre there in Navan is 100,000 €100,000 of a lease annually. So on about an 8% yield, it's about 1.3 million. So it's the real power of that. Supermarkets are higher than that.
And it's a few hundred grand to build, right? It's a 300 grand box or whatever you're going to spend, and that's the value of it, because it's the income, not the bricks and mortar or the metal and power.
Like your one in Twickenham, Stu, I'm sure the yield is very good. What's the valuation yield based off?
It's based on, from the surveyors come in, I think it's 5.5%, which is great, yeah, because the ground floors pay for the whole building, so we've got 6 units in Twickenham again for free, effectively. I mean, we've got 120 grand for 6 units.
Stuart, can we just
4 1-beds.
Can we just clarify that point, just for anyone listening as well, that what's happening there economically to the business model of that project? We spoke earlier about each project, each development project being like its own business with its own business merits. And the difference if you take a full scheme and go, I'm going to go all resi, well, all of your risk and predictability is kind of crystal ball gazing, because you've got to wait to the back end to crystallize your exit, right? What valuation you're going to get from the lender, how much you're going to be able to sell them for, how much you're going to be able to rent them for. You really can only find out on the back end, unless you sell off plan and do other bits and bobs, which there's still an element of risk because you've still got to build them out. Whereas with the commercial, if you take a ground floor and then put this and can agree a commercial lease, and they will guarantee that rent with a good covenant strength, you're kind of securing your exit in some way, at least the valuation part of your exit, which then can give you a lot more conviction with what to do with the rest of the scheme, or can give you, like you've just said there, that ground floor pays for the rest of the scheme. People may not necessarily be aware of what that means. So do you want to just explain what that means, where you can have a strong enough ground floor tenant with good covenant strength paying us XYZ amount of rent, and based on the cap rate on that valuation, now you've paid for the scheme? Just explain what that means.
Yeah, sure. So taking the one in Twickenham, it's a bulbous shaped building. It's on the London Road in Twickenham. It's 2 minutes from the train station. It's got all the criteria that I would normally look for in a building. Looking at from a residential mindset prior to looking at this commercial, I was always going to cut off the back of the shop off, try and create 7 units in there, 3 2-beds, 4 1-beds, and either convert the front into 2 smaller units, which would be looking at it from a small perspective, and then actually looking at the site going, well, actually, let's give the whole ground floor and the basement to one tenant. There is one tenant, there's one pre-lease. There is a few more legal things you need to do. You have to agree all the pre-lease and agree the whole package with them, and agree terms and how long they want it. But ultimately, we paid 1.27 million for the building. Can't quite remember. But the ground floor tenant in situ with a lease signed has now meant that that ground floor alone with the basement's about 1.17, call it. So there's 100 to 120 grand left that's outstanding. But now we've got the first floor, second floor, and third floor of some prime real estate on a beautiful building in Twickenham, which if you divide that, it's 20, 25 grand a unit, which is only going to cost us, even if we spend 150 grand a unit, which we're not going to spend anywhere near that. So it's 120 likely to be with all the green credentials we like to put in. But you're looking at 400 to 500 grand flats in that area. So there's so much money now being made just because the tenant is, even though he's a fairly new business, he's committing to spend about 600 grand on getting everything out into effectively a lovely brand new dentist, which if anything, hopefully nothing happens, but anything happens to his business in say 2-3 years, we're going to have a brand new dentist, which will then go out to market to another dentist practice, which obviously I wish him all the luck in the world, and I'm sure he'll do very well. But because it's a social tenant that are high income producing, that the banks love them. So they'll give you a lower yield on that site because of that type of tenant. That was actually the first viewing and the first offer full asking price based on what we went out for. And that was done quite quickly into the completion. We bought this pre-auction, and the same with the Windsor one. The reason the Windsor one's taken longer is we had so many different options. Where we turn it into a hotel, where we turn it into a cafeteria, a pizzeria, a coffee shop. There's all these different types. So we had to try and work out what the flavor was and what people would see in the building. And just by doing more, I've now got a list as long as your arms of these tenants who are looking for certain building types. So by having these meetings, understanding what they look for in a building and their locations and stuff, it builds you this picture where you sort of become open to the world of opportunity, which is all going and being fed into effectively my mind when I'm looking at sites going, that's perfect for tenant A, that's perfect for tenant B. And then we can approach them directly now or via our agent. So yeah, it all feeds in this whole commercial world where I was obviously under the FUD, the fear, uncertainty and doubt of all the banks who are very exposed to commercial buildings. But these are not the commercial buildings I'm looking for. I'm looking for a completely different end of the spectrum of commercial. So yeah, I was originally put off by it and just try and stay away from it. But actually, the more you understand, the more you can really focus your strategy on it. That's what I've got to say about that.
Banging. And Ronan, have you done any commercial to resis and retain the assets with the commercial on the ground floor and the resis above, or do you always sell them off?
No, all my stuff is ground up, new construction. My problems with refurbs, one, I just never started off with them. Everything's going back to brick. There's a lot of things you don't know. It just won't be for me. In traditional residential construction, the only place you really should lose money is possibly in the ground, because you don't know what's underneath or what kind of ground conditions there are generally. Build up a stone, how levels work with roads and finish floor levels, etc. for drainage. They're all things that can change. But I haven't is straightforward. I've built commercial with resi on top, and kept the commercial, but it's all been ground up. It's different as well, a building technique than traditional houses. Obviously, it's more RC work, reinforced concrete, and you've curtain walling and stuff like that. But generally retrofits is not for me at the moment anyway.
Yep, fair enough. I mean, Jack, you do a lot of retrofits. You got anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, there's unknowns with anything. You can start turfing up the ground and find problems. Sort of segueing into commercial, we obviously just try and lean it as much on the previous owner as much as we can. We do inspection holes before we actually acquire the site. There's an element of risk that you have to take there. We actually make provisional sums in for worst case, and quite often it's better case. So there's ways to manage that. We like conversions because they're quick. We found our niche because we can't build out the ground as cheap as the big home builders out there. So we found that we've actually been kind of forced into a bit of an adopted niche, sort of bigger than an unprofessional developer, but smaller than national home builders. So that's why we like conversions, and we're super quick. To get, we can normally find a site, get the prior approval agreed before we exchange, complete on the site, deliver the site and sell it within about 24 months, which is, if you compare that to even with quick planning timeframes, if you bought a consented site that was Ground up, that's still pretty quick. But yeah, that's why we like it. I've actually got a comparable example for commercial and resi. We viewed a site which was actually an old NHS clinic to buy it, 1,400 square feet with a nice garden and surrounding buildings around it. And they had modelled up to knock the building down and build 6 flats to make about a couple of $100,000 profit. We actually found a tenant, which was a children's nursery, who carried their own fit out, did a 10-year full repairing lease, rented the building for 40k, and we bought it for 370. And we just refied and kept them in there. Makes about 2k net profit every month without doing any work. And they're in there. That was 6 years ago, so they're in there for another 4 years. But they've put their stamp on it, so they'll probably sign another 10-year lease. But super easy. You can definitely scale a significant commercial portfolio with a lot less time and effort and risk.
Banging.
Just on that commercial to new build, a lot of the banks and councils will look at a conversion as higher risk, where I look at it and go, well, the building's already there. What is the risk? I mean, yes, you've got to strip everything back, and there is anomalies. You can do things per square foot, in my opinion. You just need to take out all the anomalies, whether it's the floor construction, the fire breaks, and all the rest of it. You need to think about access, cutting new staircases and stuff. But I've not done new build. We've got 5 houses that we're going through planning at the moment, which is already a pain in the bum. But ultimately, that is going to be our first sort of dip in the toe with the new build stuff. But ultimately, most of the risk is in the ground, getting out of the ground. I mean, the rest of it's fairly straightforward. Then you've got section 278s and stuff. So I'm still very green at all this sort of side. So I'm looking at sites that have got soft landscaping, quite easy for access, rather than you boys. I mean, obviously, Ronan loves a new build site, and we'll know more about the risks than me. But at the moment, I feel like the commercial to resi of an existing building is less risky than new build.
Yeah, I think it's just more the unknowns in the build part, isn't it? But yeah, if you want to retain assets, commercial to resi, I guess that's most of our incentive to why we want to do commercial to resi, because that's more likely that you're going to be able to keep them unless you get serious quantum with build to rent schemes. But then you're talking deca millions required to build them. But yeah, I mean, that's been a banging podcast, guys. I got to shoot to a planning committee meeting, which is going to be fucking boring.
Take your swear jar with you, Rye.
Yeah, I will. I mean, I am actually scheduled to speak because one of the local residents wants to speak, and I love it when I get to speak because start fucking ripping it into them, start selling the scheme and all its merits. But yeah, anyway, that's been a great podcast, guys. It's great to have Ronan on. Ronan, thank you for coming on, mate.
Cheers,
sharing
mate.
Hell of a lot of knowledge there. Yeah, awesome. I mean, we'll definitely bring Ronan back on again in the future. Obviously, missing Big D today, but he should be back for episode 10. And yeah, if you're listening to this podcast, wherever you are in the world, we release this every Thursday at 5:30 a.m. GMT. So tune in. It's on either Spotify or YouTube. You can find all our social medias and everything else about us in the description of this podcast. And I won't forget to make sure Ronan's is also in the description of this podcast. But yeah, good episode. Nice one, guys. What do we think? Switching up a bit today. Was decent.
Yeah, mate. Obviously, loves and faults with Dorian and the family, and hope to see him soon. But Ronan, thanks for stepping in, mate. It's an absolute pleasure getting you on the podcast. And yeah, do give him a follow and a like and all the rest of it, and like this podcast. And we'll see you again soon, mate.
Yeah, Ronan, you're going to become part of the furniture.
Looking forward to it. All right, guys, have a great week.
Yeah, nice one. Like, comment, subscribe, guys. Big love. Big love.
Oh, for Doz.
Oh, yeah, shit. For Doz. Miss you, D.
Ground up sound. Ooh, yeah. Real estate deal. We lay